So because, again, to explain to our listeners, a diabetic's problem is that they have high sugar, a lot of sugar in their blood, and they need their cells to pick that up. And when the fructose is combined with the glucose is actually helping the cells pick up the glucose as well as the fructose. Is that what you're explaining, Dr. Peat?
Yeah, it stimulates the cells to take up glucose very much the way insulin does. And in fact, you can't distinguish the effects on some of the crucial enzymes that handle the absorption and use of glucose. Fructose and the pyruvic acid that it turns into stimulate the enzymes that oxidize pyruvic acid just the same way insulin stimulates that same enzyme. So they're really, one replaces the other perfectly.
And if a diabetic eats a whole grain or beans or any other starchy type of foods, then they don't have the same ability to use that sugar because it's mainly in the form of glucose, and so then they end up with elevated sugar numbers.
And elevated insulin to handle that.
Or not if they're insulin dependent.
Yeah.
But the funny thing, I think, that just to go back to this counterculture, is diabetics are told avoid orange juice, avoid sugar, white sugar, and eat whole grains. And that's exactly the opposite of what I've seen work in our clinic with diabetics, because when diabetics avoid the grains and the starches, even if they're whole grains and beans and root vegetables, and they eat the honeys, the white sugars, and the fruits, their sugar numbers become much more manageable.
Yeah, and it was in 1874 that someone first published a paper on the fact that fructose is metabolized by diabetics, where glucose isn't. And at the same time, people were applying the use of sucrose therapeutically for diabetics. But after the publication of the paper showing that diabetics can metabolize fructose, it was fairly common for people to recommend use of fructose or sucrose to diabetics rather than plain glucose.
It's just, I think another thing, too, that happens with sugary foods is you don't often find a food that just has white sugar or honey in it. It's usually a sugar or honey with a carbohydrate, and that's where I think the diabetics get into problems with eating so-called sweet foods.
And worse than that, the polyunsaturated fats are very often combined as shortening in bakery products, for example.
Right. Okay, so that brings us to our good example and our bad example of sugar and fat, because then, of course, the sugar needs to be eaten with a fat as well as a protein, which is what one of our listeners asked me specifically to talk about tonight.
The enzyme I mentioned before, pyruvic dehydrogenase, which is activated by insulin or by fructose to handle the oxidation of glucose, that happens to be activated also by saturated fatty acids, but it's inhibited by polyunsaturated fatty acids. And the big overall diet change in the U.S. over the last 40 years has been, contrary to what a lot of people are saying, it's been a slight decrease in sugar, a slight increase in starch consumption, and a big 7% increase in added fats to foods. And most of those fats are unsaturated because of the fear of saturated fats.
And the cheapness. Now it's a cheapness, isn't it? The corn oil and safflower oil, all those unsaturated fats, canola, everything but every liquid vegetable oil apart from olive oil, basically, is
en masse. Hectares and hectares.
And
you're right.
Already in the 1960s, the polyunsaturated fats were recognized to be the diabetogenic factors. They interfere with the ability to oxidize glucose. It's more recently that they've seen that they specifically inhibit the enzyme which is activated by fructose and insulin.
And don't they also destroy the pancreatic beta cells that produce the insulin?
Oh, yeah. Every place you look, the polyunsaturated fats contribute to diabetes.